Okay, so my name is Crystal Mazur. I am a freelance developer and game writer, and I've worked on a whole bunch of different game systems. I worked on Chicago by Night. I worked on Let the Streets Run Red and the Player's Guide for Vampire 5th Edition. I've also worked on Never Going Home, which uses the +1 system. It's World War I Eldritch Horror. I am the lead system for lead developer for Pip system, which uses a D6 system. So I've written for a whole bunch of different mechanics. I have played around with mechanics for this so much that I do game conversions in my head for fun. I'm actually going to teach you the technique that I use to get it into my head so that I can do what I do just in my head. My other panelists here, I'm going to have them introduce themselves. They're all both fantastic writers and developers, and have actual published conversion systems and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So, all right.
My name is Brennan Taylor. I am the principal game designer for Galileo Games, which does Bulldogs, Thousand Arrows, and Katanas and Trenchcoats are our current big products. I converted Bulldogs, which was originally a house system, into D20 back in the day when D20 was a thing, and then later converted it to Fate core system. So I'm familiar with taking existing material and converting it to different stuff. Thousand Arrows also started as a Legend of the Five Rings hack that I had made into Powered by the Apocalypse.
I'm Mitchell. I am a publisher of Penny for a Tale, or at Penny for a Tale. I do writing and art direction for a couple other titles as well. My main work has been with Chew with Forge in the Dark, as well as the Gear system, which is a card-based system, using a set of French deck as well as a tarot deck. Other than that, I've worked with Powered by the Apocalypse with like Helmgas doing horror, as well as like some other weird Euro systems.
Okay, so just so I can get a feel for why everyone is here, first of all, we are talking about converting role-play game systems from one to another. We did have someone who was like, are you converting board games? And I was like, no, that's not our specialty. So if you are thinking about converting board games, if it's board games to role-playing games, you might be able to do so, might be able to figure it out. Otherwise, if it's like a board game to a board game, it's not quite what the focus is here, so just a heads up on that. As far as game systems are concerned, how many of you are like D&D 5th edition or something like that, like Pathfinder, something like that? How many of you have like a set game that you always play in, that your group always plays in? Okay. How many of you have a setting that you have in that game and you want to try something else? A couple of you? Okay. And how many of you are looking to convert like a setting that you got into like your game's home mechanics? Cool. How many of you think it's Avatar that you want to because that's a very popular one. I will say Powered by the Apocalypse is a fantastic system. Give it a shot if that is like really, really honest and honestly give it a shot. You will like it. Okay, that being said, this is a workshop style. I'm expecting this to be, there might be some downtime where I'm giving you guys some time to work or ask questions or anything like that. I am a teacher by trade. If that makes you nervous, I apologize. But if you guys are writing stuff or you guys are actually working like on character sheets or something like that, don't worry about thinking you have to continually pay attention and look forward. That's not what this is a workshop style, not a seminar style. So I might be talking, you might be working on something. I will gladly help you or go back or whatever the case may be and re-explain things, okay? Normally I do questions at the end of stuff. That's not, feel free to do the raise your hand thing just so you get my attention. But if you have a question as I'm talking, please ask it because I cannot read memories or minds and I do not want to. So if you have a question, most likely someone else also has that question. Feel free to ask, okay? So, like I said, I'm working primarily from converting. I have D&D, which is, I'm assuming what a lot of people are somewhat familiar with at the very least. And that's kind of why I picked it, into pip system. And this was actually my very first thing that I learned how to convert. So what I want to do is, I have like the big checklist. That's my notes for this. So if you guys got the physical notes or you guys came up and scanned the QR code, for those of you that came a little late, there's a QR code with notes that the three of us put together. If you want them, please feel free to come up and grab it. I also have resources on there as well for you guys to be able to use. I'll give everybody a second. I also have character sheets for both my game systems as well as monsters for both my systems, because I'm going to go over how to use that into conversion. So if you want to grab something, go ahead. I have pencils up there if you need a writing utensil. And everything that we talk about is going to translate to most systems. So if we don't talk about your specific system, you can still use the basic ideas to convert those.
And I'm totally willing to talk to people about individual systems as well. Yeah.
Same here. If you are someone that needs a little bit more help, and the individual system itself is maybe a little bit more crunchy than you're used to, like GURPS, and you're like, I have no idea how to convert GURPS, then yeah, I will both have our social medias, all of our social medias linked in the show notes once this is posted, but we will also share our social medias and stuff like that for you guys at the end of all of this. Okay, so I think the very first thing is that I want to talk about, before I get into like the nitty gritty, there are a couple things that I want to talk about, and we as a panel kind of talked a little bit beforehand. We want to talk about like the aspects of what it is specifically, like the important things to actually convert. Because a lot of people get hung up on the math. How many of you actually like math?
Oh,
cool. How many of you absolutely hate math and you only do it out of spite? No? Okay. I'll say there's got to be at least one. Yeah. How many of you are just kind of on the math?
Yeah.
Okay. The math is actually one of the least important things to worry about, because you're never going to get a true statistical conversion between game systems unless you're using D20 or like the same type of dice through the entire thing. You can get close, and that's some of the resources that I have if that's something that really is important to you. But so I want to open this up to give you guys some time to speak. Mm-hmm. What are the important things that you guys look at when you are converting systems?
So I think the key thing is that you want to have the new version at least feel to the players like the old version would have felt in their previous system. So you want to convert that. You got to be converting the general overall aura of it. That's a little loosey-goosey, but it needs to serve the needs of the new system in a way that feels consistent to the way that it was serving the needs of the old system.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think what Avatar, the RPG, did with their combat system was very ingenious in terms of, like, Powered by Apocalypse is not a combat system at all. You're going to be bored if you're going into it because you're rolling one die, or not one die, but you're rolling a couple dice, compared to if you're coming from, like, Pathfinder or D&D, where combat is stretched out and there's all sorts of options and stuff that you can do. But Avatar Legends brought in like a whole intuitive Powered by Apocalypse combat system within that kind of base. which made it feel more of leaning slightly towards that Pathfinder path or D&D aspect in terms of at least combat, where there are options and you go turn by turn, and there's tactics and there's strategy, and there are good moves and there are bad moves, which is always enjoyable in any TTRPG. Yeah.
Nice. Okay, and yeah, for me, it is very much about the feel and how the setting is going to serve the mechanics, because it has to be a give and take between the mechanics and the setting. If you have a mechanic that is just not working for the feel that you want, then you're going to have to try to figure out, did you place it in the wrong area? Did you think differently on this and it's not the right one? Or do you just need to kind of get rid of that entirely and come up with something else that fits better, that works in the new system? Okay? So when we are looking at that, is there any sort of advice while they're starting to look at this stuff that you guys want to give them to kind of pay attention to so that they know what they're kind of looking at when we start doing this stuff?
I would say, like, check out what mechanics actually serve the style of play that you're looking for. So if you're aiming for combat, then what does the new system give you for combat, and how do you convert the style of play that you want? Like with Bulldogs, when I converted it from D20 to Fate, the thing that I wanted was a very dynamic and action-oriented combat system. So I made sure that I had that. But I also, in the D20 system, had a nice big equipment list, and Fate doesn't support that as well. So I created new rules that let you customize weapons in Fate. So that kept the gear aspect from one system to the other. So
yeah, and one of my favorite aspects is bringing in horror into like these different systems, especially for 5e, where at least in my perspective, it's very tough, and I love horror, and I love the dark and the twisted things. And so you kind of have like a couple levels of horror where you're going from like slasher all the way to like Italian, like horrific, human centipede-esque horror, where you get into realms that it's hard to capture within a monster stat the truly horrific nature of it. And so trying to figure out like, okay, what are some things that I can bring into this monster that make them feel horrific when you bring it in? So a lot of like out of combat special qualities and abilities, creating in them ways to manipulate the PCs in ways that bring that horror to the forefront. I mean, a lot of horror is kind of like a self-looking at, or self-looking, you know, looking at yourself and seeing like these horrific things. Helmgast with Cult did a tremendous job with that aspect of it. Some of the newer Call of Cthulhu stuff also does that as well. And then a couple of the Free League Alien scenarios do that. But just seeing them kind of create their monsters in a way that, sure, they're scary, and especially for Alien. Like, we've all seen that Alien before, and so it's hard to be like, okay, why is that scary now in this scenario, since I've seen all, like, 3, 4, 5 movies, I don't know. But the special qualities that they bring into each scenario with each monster for just a generic alien makes it truly horrific. And so that's an important aspect. It's like, what qualities, what special abilities are you bringing in that are, one, fun for everyone at the table, and like, two, horrific?
Okay. And one of the things that I recommend is that if there is something like a conversion book or like just the system book, you pick up the system book. I know Cypher System has that. Pip System, that is the whole thing. There is actually no setting. There's like suggested settings and then like small little splats, but nothing large built around it. If you don't have anything like that, take a look at the book itself from a mechanic standpoint and not the setting standpoint. So remove the setting from what you are reading and take a look at it from there. And that's actually kind of where it leads into the best way to do that is to look at a blank character sheet for everything, because those are literally the system points and areas that you are going to want to be looking at to convert. And then look at it for characters as well as monsters or NPCs. In PIP system, they're called extras. You're going to want to be familiar with both of the settings that you are going to be converted with, at least somewhat. You don't have to play them or be an expert at them, but you really kind of want to know what it is they're doing and why they're doing it. One of the big problems that I had, and I'll get to it when I get to it, D&D has death saving throws. PIP system does not. You're knocked out. It's a family-friendly game, so there is really no actual mechanical death in PIP system unless it's agreed upon by the game guide and the player. So I'm going to talk about like how I figured out how to do that from a mechanical standpoint, because there is no agreement with D&D unless the table or the players agree that I'm knocked out and my character doesn't want to come back. They're salty. Yeah. So unless it's like an agreement outside, there is actually no mechanical way to just have an agreement between the player and the GM and a D&D's table. With PIP system there is. So I want to talk a little bit about how to kind of mash that together to work for both of those systems. Okay, so is there anything else that you guys want to know, or because you guys will also have time, individual time to speak on your own. So is there anything else before we get started into?
Let's get started.
Okay, cool.
Well, I would say like I think that's also helpful is looking at like system adjacent stuff. So like was it Forge in the Dark and Powered by the Apocalypse play very similar in some ways, and then you start seeing people branching out. Like City of Mist did this really cool thing where instead of basing the dice system on the number you have in a stat or a characteristic, you're instead of picking out qualities that you feel is relevant to the action from a various set of different tiny like aspects of the character. Chew did that as well with like these weird food related approaches. And so like even if you're looking at conversion, you're like, man, maybe this isn't working out exactly how I want. There's probably a system out there that's kind of like right next to it. That might have the amount of flexibility that would make the whole process just a little bit easier. So definitely look at some people who have created something new, like within the last couple of years, involving that system, because they're usually trying to branch out a little bit more, and that's always helpful.
Okay, so I'm going to get into my conversion thing for this. So what I want you to do is the first thing that you're going to want to look at is the game that you have. So the one that you want to convert. So for me, that's going to be the D&D one. And this is kind of a cheat because D&D Beyond actually has everything separated. If you look from a layout perspective, everything that you are going to be converting into chunks is actually separated on the character sheet. So for instance, I have post-it notes up here. I also do highlighters, but what I'll do is I'm going to go through and break this sheet apart into sections, whether you circle it, whether you give it a number or anything like that. I like colors, I like visual stuff, and in fact, I like doing rainbow colors, so I'm going to start with pink first. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the biggest thing. And I know with D&D, the biggest thing is actually going to be your basic attributes, which is strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. And I'm going to highlight that. Then I'm going to go through and I'm going to look again, and like the skills are right there, and I know that those are affected by the attributes. So I'm actually going to do that in a similar color, not the same color, but a similar color, because I know I'm going to have to convert those around the same point. So I'm going to go like that. And they're different boxes. I can tell the difference, but you might not be able to from here. Okay, so so what I want you to do is to go through your character sheet, and everyone has the same character sheet too. So I want you to go through and kind of put where you would place it, because like I could show you where everything I do is, but everyone is going to interpret things a little differently. So I want you guys to do it the way that you would on a first glance of this, or even second or third or fourth, or if you're very familiar with it, like I can read this thing in my sleep. So So go through real quick and just kind of section off sections. And then, does anyone have any questions about that? How to do that? Any clarification at all? No?
Do you have any more VPIP system links?
Yes, I do.
Never mind, thank you.
There you go. Okay. So if you are still working on this, that's totally fine. What I want you guys to do is to just keep working. I'm going to continue to talk, and then if you have questions or anything like that, feel free to ask them or pause me or tell me that I am going way too fast. Okay, so what I did, and I'll come and show, I highlighted all of my areas, and like this right here, I did it in the same color because they're going to be a little bit different than the actual character sheet because this is equipment and action economy things. Those are going to be a different part of the conversion for all of this. So what I want to do now is I want to make myself familiar with the PIP system. Okay, so if you get your character sheets out, I'm going to walk through PIP system. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you the things that you need to know about this character sheet. And you can write in stuff as you need to. So you have like, this is where this goes on this character sheet, okay? So first off, PIP system is a D6 system. It's a dice pool system. So your characters will roll their D6s. And they will also roll the challenge rating D6s. 4s, 5s, and 6s are successes on both ends. All right? Whoever has the highest wins the round, even if it's just one success. Okay? If you look at the top, you have two types of health. You have physical health and mental health. And those will play differently in combat for some characters it doesn't. Okay? And there are some things where you get to choose whether you take a physical or a mental hit. Okay? So you have to kind of think about that too with the different types of damage in Dungeons and Dragons. How would that work? Okay? There's fortune, and I'm going to tell you that fortune is things that are used to re-roll dice, add dice to a roll, or make the GM roll a dice against themselves. Okay? And then initiative is what you add to your combat. Then I want you to go down to the skills. So you're going to see things like aim, athletics, charm, coerce. Those are your skills. Those are the big things that you are going to buy into first as a character generation. Okay? Then you're going to see 3 lines with nothing written on them. Those are going to be your qualities. So you could probably write qualities on one of those. But those are going to be smaller things that are really, really, really specific. So for instance, with aim, you could have aim with bow and arrow. Aim with rocks. Okay? And with Molotov cocktails if you're playing that type of game. Okay? Athletics is going to be things like are you a fast runner? Or are you a mountain climber? Okay? So things like that. you are going to be able to buy into up to 5 points in each of those, and that's what makes your dice pool. So your skill is going to be what the base is, and then if your quality applies to the roll, you would add those dice to it. Okay? So, and you can only have up to the amount of dice that you have in your skill point. So for instance, with aim, if you want to have bow and arrow 3, you have to have an aim of 3 first before you can buy that up. Okay? So your qualities can never be more than your skill, the base. All right? Everyone follow along so far? Cool. Okay. Advanced qualities are going to be like those really, really special, very niche things. So for instance, you have bow and arrow. I've been using that a lot. Maybe you like to do trick shots. A trick shot is going to be something that's going to be an advanced quality. You're going to have a proficiency in a skill, at least one skill, sometimes 2, and then at least 1 quality. Okay? That you're going to have on this side before you can buy this. Okay? Everyone good so far with that? Cool. This will also add dice. And then features and items are going to be things that are not really mechanic based, but maybe things like I have a deck of cards, or I have a book that is all of my poetry. It's going to be things that might come in handy. You don't know. There's an actual play where someone had a magic deck for their cards, and they had some sort of Eldritch Cthulhu horror thing coming out of a cake, and he's like, can I draw a magic card and throw it and see if it works and cast Fireball? And the GM was like, sure, let's do that. So, you know, there could be things that could have a mechanical benefit at some point, but don't have anything written. So it could be something cool to enhance a scene. It could be something that might be necessary at some point, but that's about it, okay? That's going to be different than your gear. Your gear is going to be things like armor, weapons, things like that that are going to add dice or make it harder for you to hit, okay? And the connections are your personal connections to NPCs or extras and or characters. There is a session 0 type of mechanic in PIP system where you can make a connection to the person, a positive connection to the person on your right and a negative connection to the person on your left. And so you have built up at the table a sort of web of things that are going on before you even start. So that's what your connections are. Okay? Everyone with me so far? Okay, so now I want you to take a look and think about some of the differences and things that you might have to consider when you start converting from D&D to PIP system, okay? And there are more mechanics and stuff like that. I'm not going to get into the super, super nitty-gritty because I'm assuming most of you aren't going to be converting to PIP system. But it's nice to get my game's name out there. So just think about that for a minute. And then what I want you to do is to start taking a look at your 2 character sheets and where would you put each of the sections from D&D into here. And you can either number them. If you are a kinesthetic learner, I have movable Post-its if you would like to move them back and forth or anything like that. These are up here. You can grab these. Okay? So just take a moment to do that and start to see where you would kind of play around with that stuff. I'm going to cut out the silences.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any questions so far at all?
What's the difference between charm and coerce?
So charm is how charismatic you can be while talking, and coerce is how manipulative you can be while talking.
It's like positive and negative.
Yeah, I'm gonna say for the benefit of explanation, yes. Coercive not necessarily negative. It could be that you don't want somebody to find out the whole truth about something that happened. Not necessarily negative, it might be for their own protection type of thing. But yes, for
Traditional connotation.
yeah, traditional connotation would be positive and negative.
Okay.
Okay, so for the benefit of making sure everybody has their time too, you can do the same thing with the NPCs and the extras. So Dungeons and Dragons, I'm assuming you guys are all kind of familiar with everything. You can, if you look at the character sheet, you can kind of break it apart. I did try to get 2 power level characters that are about the same, at least traditionally. But what I want you to do with actually the extras, I'm going to grab this real quick. I'm going to go over real quick with the pip system so that you know what you're looking at. So this is going to be general enemies, and it's going to be like, you could use thug or duplicate. Corrupted Politician doesn't have the whole thing printed, but you can use either of those two, doesn't matter. Your CR rating is how many dice base they get. So with a CR of 1, they're going to get 1 dice. The hits are how many hit points. So even if you have like 3 successes against them, they're only going to take 1 damage unless otherwise specified, like a weapon or magic or something else. Then there's a little description of it. And then you're going to see like a little arrow with bold titles. Those are going to be things that are what's called qualities. All of our extras have qualities, and at least 3 qualities. We do have things like a kaiju that has like 5 because it's Godzilla. Like, they're going to be able to do a lot more than some street gang member, you know. But they will have at least all base of 3. Then you're going to see a C or a G next to those. That is either combat or general. C and combat can only be used during combat. General can be used anytime. Okay? And then you're going to see the description of those. You're going to see either a +1 W or maybe, I don't think there's any +B. So your dice are, in pip system, white or black dice. The white dice are the character's dice. The black dice are the opposing dice. And those are going to add dice to the base dice pool that you just did for your character sheets. Or for this one, like the thug, a CR1 starts with 1 white or 1 dice for them. And then they get +1 W, so they'll have 2 dice to roll on some things. Okay? Everyone follow me so far? Cool. Okay. So I just want you to kind of play around with the monsters on each side. Take a look at the monsters on each side and see where you would convert with each of those using the same, like the exact same method for the characters. Okay? So those are for you guys to play around with. And then to do the system itself, there are burst dice in pip system. So what I did with that is I use that as the advantage or disadvantage. If you have an advantage in a roll, you get a burst dice in that roll instead in pip system. If the enemy, or you have disadvantage, the enemy gets the burst dice. So their 6s will then be able to be re-rolled against you. So that's how I converted that. When it comes to death saving throws, I actually have it in some of my pip games where you are either knocked out, and then if they do more damage on top of you, you actually have to spend a fortune to not die. Or they can make like I think it's what is it? Survival. They have to make a survival roll against the CR of the monster that is fighting them. And if they lose, they die. So that's how I converted that with the pip system in mind. The other thing, most of the spells that are in here are already in D&D. They're just already converted for pip system. Save yourself the work. If it's already in there, use what's in the system already. Don't give yourself any more work. It doesn't have Eldritch Blast in there If you want Eldritch Blast, you can absolutely figure out how to do that. So, but that's going to be the basis of where you start with all of that and playing with everything. And that's kind of how, like, I took Post-it notes and physically moved things, and that's how I played with it in my brain, and that's how I learned how to convert stuff for Pip system. So now I look at it in chunks like that. And then I can very easily go to, you know, this section in the book for D&D, and then this section in the book for Pip system, and now I know which 2 chapters I need to look at for converting that. Okay? Anyone have any questions on this? This is a very kinesthetic way to learn this. It's very visual. I'm a very visual and kinesthetic learner. So, okay. So that's going to be my section. I'm going to have, who would like to go next?
You can go next.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay. So Mitch is going to go next, and then we'll have Brennan at the end.
Yeah, I guess my question is, like, for people who are willing to chat it up, like, what systems are you guys trying to convert? Like, what is the interest? Don't be shy. What are you thinking about?
For me, it's not so much converting from like one from another. Like I'm not trying to convert into some other things into 5e. I'm more of getting a feel for all these different systems, and I'm trying to more or less create something out of all of them.
Okay.
So you're trying to create your own system, or
More or
synthesize
less,
like
my
stuff?
groups
Yeah.
that I run, we over the years I have like, hey, you're playing sorcerer, so instead of spells per day, it comes out of your like exhaustion pool for you, like because it takes a physical toll out of you every time. And so that's like one different like kind of mechanic.
Yeah.
So it's more of doing those kinds of things to, not where it's like, I don't want it to be like completely steeped in realism because that would be so boring. It's just wanting it to, you talked about the, like the feel of the game, like I want each of the characters, they have a feel as they're like when you're playing a rogue, it should feel sneaky, right?
Yeah.
Whereas in a fighter, like you should feel bold or brave or whatever, like that you're in the forefront kicking ass and taking names, you know? Whereas for the sorcerer, it's like you're lobbing mini bombs at people, right, in spell form, but it's not, it's still affecting you somehow.
Yeah.
Anyways, that's why I'm here.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Honestly, this is a good way because I borrow from other systems all the time. Like Dread is one I borrow from all the time. So yeah, this is absolutely a really good avenue to do that and learn the different mechanics for each game.
Yeah, because like especially for like a magic character, there's such a variety, and I would encourage you to check out Monty Cook's Invisible Sun. Like every character is a magic user, and the way that they approach it has their own system because there's such a variety. But using what is the Monty Cook system?
Cipher system.
There you go. The cipher system is pretty like easy to understand and pretty intuitive, so it works out very well. But the way they just had different flavors of magic people is very exciting. I've always enjoyed like the shadow run, like every time I cast a spell it might like come back at me. And also like for everyone else, like kill that mage as soon as possible, which is just, I love that aspect of it because it's such a, I don't know, I guess, you know, for anyone wielding like godlike power, just the fact that everyone's gunning for you has always been fascinating for me. So Shadowrun, Monty
Everyone
Cook.
have to play together
Yeah.
rather than like, oh, I'm all the way over here. I've got 90 hit points. You can wail on me, but I'll still melt your face.
Yeah, and that's another thing I think Shadowrun did very well is, and I think Cyberpunk Red did too, to some degree, was there were different realms that, unless you were really good at it, you were easily like exploitable in terms of Shadowrun. It's like, you know, the cyber world, the material world, and like the
Magic world.
yeah, the magic world. And if you didn't have a magi protecting you, then you're weak. If you're a magi and you didn't have like a cyber decker protecting you, you're weak against that. And so in that way, like the party's like watching out for each other, and there's not one single person who's like, I'm a fighter, I'm just gonna wreck them. Because it's like, no, if you come in with a stun. Mm-hmm. Anyone else? Like what?
So personally, there's a lot of content for like 5e and stuff like that. Great content, especially like fan-made content and stuff. My friends and I have recently fallen in love with Fabio Ultima, which is vastly different.
I hung out with those guys last night till 5 a.m. I regret it. But yes, awesome game.
It's a great game, but it's very different from like everything. So looking at all this stuff for 5e that I already have, I mean, I'm kind of inspired by that, but at the same time, I love Fabio Ultima, so.
Yeah.
How do you make that? How do you reuse that stuff for Fabio
Yeah.
Ultima? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It was such a different thing. Like, it uproots like a lot of expectations for role RPGs.
And I think that's like one of the benefits we have nowadays is the communication of different like games and stuff from all around the world, because the Europeans did very different things. Dark Eye, I think, was their equivalent to like 5e, where you're like rolling under instead of rolling over, and so everyone who comes to the table, they're like, "What the heck is the one?" It's like I crit fail, and you're like, "No, that's good. You did that right." And so even like that simplistic approach of being like, I want to roll low instead of rolling high for that, like for their like 5e like D&DS game. Even like with Free League, the Swedish company, like their D6 system with which like exploded, and then now they're converting to all these different settings and stuff like that. Symbaroum is something, if you really like fantasy and Dungeons and Dragons, Symbaroum in my mind stands out as one of the better ones that Free League did, and they just released a monster bestiary for it, and they have some really cool stuff in there. Yeah, Symbaroum.
Okay.
Yeah, Free League Symbaroum, and the monsters they create have all these qualities and stuff, so it's really easy to build a monster. And so in terms of like bringing that to like, if you're trying to do more 5e stuff, or if you're just like, whatever system I want to use, I want to grab stuff from a system that is easy, that's flexible enough for you to just start picking things out of and bring it to whatever system you're going for. Symbaroum, the bestiaries are very good for that, because they have stat blocks, but then they have all these qualities and stuff that you can that build those stat blocks right, the next few pages. So then you can just start grabbing those and bring them to wherever you want.
Yes, my high school group was GURPS,
Okay.
which is just a wonderful system in some respects, but like other groups, not so much. But all their settings are just wonderful, and I've kind of been trying to slowly convert them over to other systems that would be more in line with my current group's taste in gaming. I mean, like, I haven't found a bad setting in GURPS, but most people are pretty daunted, when they see all that list of advantages and disadvantages and skill list, and then they realize, oh wait, I need that, or it's also pretty daunting, because most of them are not used to, I got shot once with an M16 and I'm done.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of converting to that. And I'm also looking for, I think Mecha is drastically underserved in the RPG. Yeah, there's Mech and Zeta, but anybody who's touched that knows that makes GURPS look like a walk in the park in terms of crunch. So I'm kind of looking for that too.
Okay.
That talking about Mecha, what are you specifically sort of looking for in terms of that aspect? Because there's been a few recent indie ones like Lance RPG that can really...
Those are more the Gundam style. Like, I've looked at that one, I've looked at Battle Century G.
You're saying more like Armored Core?
Something more, yeah. I don't quite want that super fantasy Gundam style, but I also want the hulking robot battle tech thing either, I know that's a weird, it feels like those are your two spectrums, either big hulking or near super heroic, mecha. I'm kind of trying to find that.
I mean, it's the TTRPG world. There's a niche book everywhere for everything. One of my favorites, I think, is Hot Guys Making Out. So very specific, People know what they're getting into. Two people will be making out by the end of this. But yeah, someone made that. And I think that's part of the enjoyability of role-playing games, and the accessibility is like, if you think about it, there's that answer somewhere out there. It's just, hunting down those booth people and shaking them and be like, what do you have?
So this is what I was kind of trying to find a game that would give me the right amount of crunch with the right feel. So it's like, I know I'm going to have to do this myself.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a matter of finding
a
it.
jumping off point.
What?
Finding a jumping off point that you
Yeah.
can put as a basis for your rule set before you can.
Yeah, I don't have to build my own rule set. I want to find a nice rule set that's close and then go, okay, I can hammer in whatever else I need.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's also like finding a system that's at least intuitively easy to not mess up too much. I found that difficult with Pathfinder First Edition, where me and a few people who've been playing like forever, we make our characters, and like a new person will come and they just get like, they're not doing anything, they're not accomplishing anything. Especially with Pathfinder having what I would call like bad choices mechanically, strictly, where you're like, the description of this archetype or whatever is like, yeah, you'll be able to do that. Then in reality, you can't do that. And I think that's also very hard for like a complex system is finding that like that control variable where you're like, I don't want you to be able to make a decision that is so horrific you won't be able to play. Which we were talking about the M16 taking someone out. Makes me think of, but oh man, I have not played GURPS ever, and I feel like I need to.
The TLDR, to start off with about 100 points for your character, your hit points are equal to your health, more or less, and getting a health of 13 will cost you 30 of those points, and M16 puts out either 6 dice 6 or 8 dice 6 worth of damage with one round, and there's a chance the average shooter is going to hit you with 2 to 3 numbers.
Yeah.
I'll let you do the math from there. And like,
Yeah.
good body armor might give you DR 10 to 12.
Yeah, I like the what is it? Is it maybe World of Darkness, but Aberrant?
Okay.
What company makes that?
That's
That's
Onyx
right.
Path.
Onyx
Path,
Path,
yeah.
yeah. Some of the new Onyx Path stuff I feel is very like, especially with Aberrant, you're making those like very like custom decisions where you're using points and stuff like that. So I'm definitely certain they don't have a mech one, but I think that might be a good starting like jumping point for something like that. And I think Aberrant, I feel just the weirdness of it and the power scale, I think would also like work well with like a mech sort of thing. But man, I need to play GURPS. That's what I got from that. Anyone else?
Anyone else? Yeah.
I'll just say I'm here because in the past I've kind of woven in other systems to an ongoing game. So we were playing 5e and there was a situation where a heist was coming up. And like typically in Dungeons and Dragons, it's easy to fall in the trap of a heist is, okay, rogue, go. And so I wanted to make it a little more interesting. I just learned about Blades in the Dark, so I converted the PCs into Blades in the Dark. And I've also, so I know I've done it in the past, and I know I will do it in the future, so that's pretty much why I'm here.
Okay, so you're trying to get 5e to Blades in the Dark, basically, is one of the things that you're after.
And beyond.
Pretty much, and
Yeah.
just like, I know that I will do it in the future with other systems, like
Right,
we played
right.
Pathfinder 2, we've played Magical Kittens, I've heard of Lancer and almost ran that for the next game.
Yeah.
So I just get an idea of how to convert anything to anything else, or like what a good conversion
Yeah.
thing would be.
I mean, like for stealth missions and heists, weirdly, I've leaned a lot on the By Night Studios LARP system that they do for Vampire, and they just came out with a new Kickstarter, so I don't know how that one will be yet, but at least the By Night Studios Vampire LARP rules, and so this is going to be very confusing because when you go out there, you're going to look at it and you're going to see their TTRPG rules, and now I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about specifically the LARP rules, which is a rock, paper, scissors system. But the fact that they have like rules and abilities and stuff that help you, because whenever a heist comes up in an average D&D party, everyone's like looking at the paladin like you're just gonna ruin everything. We're gonna get into a fight. Why bother? for a heist if we're just going to end up killing everyone, which is like the Assassin's Creed style of espionage. But yeah, like By Night Studios, and I think you can look at a lot of the stuff online for free, especially now. They have like a whole like compendium. But they have stuff for like, well, you're stealthy enough, you can help out one or two other people. And then especially like you chose great with Blades in the Dark. I would encourage you definitely check out, was it the Battle Brothers one?
Band of Blades?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that one was like a very like more leaning towards the I guess what a D&D party would be, except like in a horrific setting, like post-apocalyptic almost, filled with zombies.
What was that one called, sir?
Band of Blades?
Band of Blades.
Yeah. You're kind of like a mercenary company in a war against the evil overlord, but the evil overlord won. So
it's a lot of those, like, especially some of the missions on there's a variety of them. And I think it is a really good stepping ground to a lot of different stuff, especially if you want to bring more stuff into your Blades in the Dark game. Mm-hmm. The Forge in the Dark, in of itself, like I know Chew in City of Mist, especially City of Mist because it's very piecemeal. I love the mini character sheets that bring up a complete character sheet, and those character sheets kind of can shift and change as the characters advance and change, which I absolutely adore just because it's so flexible. I love it. Anyone else? I'm gonna talk at you then. Okay, I'm gonna talk at you. So for my piece, I was specifically looking at like trying to bring in like the tone and settings, and I'm looking at like Free League Lord of the Rings, right? Everyone knows Lord of the Rings for the most part, but every time I've played it, I've tried to play in a very different way. One of which I was a hobbit that just kind of did what he wanted. So he was a pretty like evil hobbit. If he was in the modern day, he'd like have a gun and like slap someone. But it was just like I was having fun. So, but it's like Lord of the Rings, from the perspective of the book as well as the movies, it's a very like good versus evil, white and black. Like it is like I think the penultimate, like this is the heroic tale that we get to share with each other. But trying to convert that to, let's say you want to do like a more horror a la like Cult with Helmgast, where at the beginning of the game, not only is there like these horrific events happening around you, but you are the horrific event. You are not a great person, and you're struggling with your inner demons. And so I was looking at like, okay, well, how would you like bring that into Free League's Lord of the Rings? And they do have like that aspect of like the hope and despair and stuff like that, but with 5e as well as the kind of I guess white and black, these are the good guys and stuff like that. A lot of the times the system glosses over the flaws. In 5e, you have a -2 in wisdom, and that's going to affect your saving throws. And there's guidance on like, hey, you should probably role play this out. But there's no like defining mechanics that say this is going to be an issue for you from here on out at every game. And so bringing in Cult, which I absolutely adore in terms of horror, that has flaws like every time this occurs, and this will occur at least once a game. You're going to be experiencing this huge negative, either like a penalty on your next couple of rolls, or you are encouraged and almost forced to play out that flaw in a way that's entertaining to the table. And I think that aspect is very important. It can't be disruptive. It has to lean towards entertaining or at least dramatic for everyone involved, so that it's an enjoyable show to watch if you're looking from the outside. And so bringing in that aspect in Cult is Powered by the Apocalypse. D10, not D6. I always forget it every time I run it, so they just end up failing all the time. But if you're going to something more like Gumshoe, which in terms of like the stealthy, sneaky stuff, Gumshoe I really enjoy for investigations. If you're comparing like Delta Green to Fall of Delta Green, Call of Cthulhu to Trail of Cthulhu, where, okay, if you fail the investigation roll, what do you do as a game master? You're just like, move on. Or I'm just going to give it to you anyway because I want this to continue on. Or you're trying to figure out a way to get them that information in another roundabout way. What Trail of Cthulhu and Fall of Delta Green do is they give you an establishment of points that you can use, that you can be like, okay, obviously I didn't get that investigation right, but I do have points in X that I can just kind of bring over to bump me over to that success. And so then it kind of becomes like this resource management where you're like, okay, throughout this mission, there are things that I want to know that are important to me, and I'm going to save, X amount of points and stuff so I can get over those hurdles when it does come. It also helps out with a table where, you might have one person who's really good at investigating and everyone else is really bad at it. Because then that one person will eventually run out of resources. And so then the other people have to bring in their own resources to kind of further the narrative. So that is one aspect, like you could, bring, you could bring some of that like espionage or investigative qualities from like, I think a system that does it very well. And finally, noir. Noir is one of my favorite genres. Capers is a card-based system that leans to like superhero noir. City of Mist is a Powered by the Apocalypse that can do noir as well as superheroes or just noir. And I think the most important aspect for the noir is kind of the dramatic flair for everything. For the Capers and for City of Mist, when you're doing that noir thing, the power scale lowers drastically. And they tell you when you're beginning a campaign or when you're building your characters, they're like, these are the different scales. You can go like, superheroes, epic, avatars. Or if you want to lean towards like noir, these are like the qualities that you should try to take but never go above. And so whenever converting and stuff like that, trying to figure out like, okay, what are the boundaries and what are the lines of these are not the things I'm going to cross, because then we jump into like other genres, which might be very confusing at the table. Other than that, I think my last thing is like, I think I put the boat paradox where it's like, if you keep removing pieces of a boat, is it really the same boat and stuff like that? My opinion is that by the end of it, no matter what happens, it's still a boat. So if you have to piecemeal Frankenstein to make the thing that is enjoyable to the table, and they're like, oh, why don't you just play this system? It's a boat. If everyone's having fun, it doesn't really matter. So yeah.
Cool. All right. So like I was saying at the beginning, the way I approach it is by trying to figure out what feel I want out of the game. And so that's what I concentrate on the new system. Like you were talking about, you want to do a heist. The system you're using now isn't handling that well, so you want a game that does have that heist feel to it. What I take is look at like and I'm talking about like actual system conversion, like take those characters, look at what the core engine of the first system is. Like in 5e, it's rolling that d20. That's the core engine. You've got your stat bonuses, you've got your other bonuses that go into it, and then compare that to the core engine of the new system. So if I'm converting something to a Powered by the Apocalypse game, it's very similar. I've still got stats that I'm adding into a set of dice that I'm rolling. So that's a much easier conversion. When I get to like Fate or something along those lines, Fate is its core engine is really the aspects. So those are descriptive phrases that give you a bonus to your rolls and that you utilize during play to sort of guide your role play. So that's a much harder conversion. It's a little more complicated to take something and move it over, but at least Fate does have skills and gear and things like that that you can tack on as additional systems. Fate Accelerated, on the other hand, is very similar in that there's stats again. They're called approaches in that system, where they are essentially, am I doing this in a clever way? Am I doing this in a daring way? Am I doing this in a a mighty way. I don't even remember what they all are. But, how am I approaching this problem determines how I'm rolling my dice. So, so what you do is you take those core systems and you try to convert the general engine that you're seeing happen in the first game into one that works for the second game. So for Fate, like I said, again, creating aspects, winnowing down the skill list, whether or not you use equipment or not, that kind of thing. So, I don't have an awful lot to add to this, unfortunately, because it's a very feel-based thing, and I kind of wanted to get an idea of what you all were trying to convert, and it seems like it's a lot of taking those 5e settings and using them in something else. I don't know what's the core engine in Fabula Ultima?
In Fabula Ultima, you have dice for different stats. I think there's 4 stats from what I remember, and basically different rolls have different, so basically if you have insight and willpower, you have a d6 and a d8, you roll those together.
Okay, so you have different dice sizes for your different stats? Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
so it's a dice growth system.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so what you'd be doing is you'd be taking those core things from 5e and trying to find an equivalent in Fabula Ultima. And
Because there's not much of adding to those.
right, exactly, right. There isn't much adding to those, so you're converting to a dice size. I've converted to Cortex Prime before, which is another die size game. That one, you have a series of pools that you're pulling dice from, like you're kind of talking about, and you build a die pool and roll that. So for Fabula Ultima, I would probably be looking at what 5e's, what's the feel of the 5e monster or situation that you've got in your supplement, and then trying to convert that over to those die sizes. Take a look at the stat blocks, and yeah.
Because Tiamat's going to have way more dice than like a goblin.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So. I'm sorry I don't have a lot going on here because I've done so much indie stuff, and it's kind of a different world. So
It's a weird world. Yeah.
So then I have a question for you guys then. Like, are you guys familiar with the +1 system? The system that Never Going Home uses?
I haven't played that one, no.
Okay, so what the +1 system does is it uses a card mechanic at the beginning of a round where everyone kind of bets a certain card and they have to meet a certain threshold. Otherwise, everything starts falling apart.
Okay.
And it's like a secret betting type of thing. And then you have the dice rolls on top of it. It's a D6 system.
Okay.
So how would you convert something like the card aspect into a non-card aspect, or adding that card aspect into something?
I think it would be
how
really
you guys do
interesting to
that?
pull the secret card system into another system and sort of use it as an add-on.
Okay.
That's adding something to the game that you don't see in a lot of systems, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like the quality of, because I think the biggest part there is the gambling aspect of
Yep.
it, which I think transfers well to dice. Especially with D6s. I've lost money in Canada for gambling. So
And there's also a lot of dice gambling games, like Ship Captain Crew, or stuff like that, like Bar Dice and stuff like that. Those are all gambling games. So yeah, you could do something like that too, but it's just a card aspect.
yeah, and in any like TTRPG, I think the viewpoint of unpredictability, despite 5e, or I think Pathfinder 1e, I think it falls between 60 to 70% chances of success, or maybe even lower. So you're as a designer, you're I want them to mostly succeed, but not by a lot.
Not necessarily, and not always succeed, because that's where the tension comes in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, and so understanding that from the context of the system, be okay, 5e tries to hit that parameter. My favorite part about free league games is they have the percentage for every amount of dice pools that you have.
Oh, they list it?
Yeah,
Nice.
all the way up. Especially that one, you can push your dice and re-roll all the ones that aren't successful, and it gives you the statistics for if you had X amount of dice and you re-rolled X amount. Here's the success chance, which I think like all like TTRPGs should have.
I think, yeah, that
especially
having
game
statistics
masters.
in there would make conversions so much easier.
Yeah.
Because then you could really see sort of one-to-one what the differences
Or
are.
just having like a basic, here are your chances of these numbers coming up on your dice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So funny enough, that leads into the stuff that I wanted to kind of close out with, because we're coming up on some of our time.
Yeah, we are. Yeah.
So if you guys go to the PDF or look at your the print off cheat sheets that I actually have anydice.com, and that will actually give you the statistics for any dice rolling.
Yeah.
And so if you are someone who really, really, really wants those statistical feel of things, or like that's where you're kind of drawn to for that, you can use that to look at the statistics and compare them to see if you can get as close as possible for converting your game to whatever system that you want. So it's a really, really, really helpful thing to do. I also have on there the dungeonsolvers.com, which is also another calculator. That one specifically started off as a D&D calculator, by the way. So it is kind of D&D specific, but you can use it for other systems too. And then the contract RPG, and that's more of an article just talking about probability and probability statistics and breaking down like what all of this means in the aspect of probability and how that changes when you do things like write magic and stuff like that. Because you brought up what is your base engine, what is the thing that runs your
Right.
yeah, like with D&D it's a 20-sided dice. With PIP system it's a D6. Everything else that's written for it breaks the rules.
Right. Yeah. All the add-ons.
All the
are
add-ons
are like
break
how
those
how you
rules.
do this thing that changes the way the base rules work.
Yep.
Yeah. Mhm.
And so if you think about it that way, where you like magic breaks the rules, all of your stats break the rules. So if you think about it that way, and you think about it from probability and statistics standpoint, you can kind of also break apart like how to convert that way too. It's a little bit deeper of a thing. You don't necessarily have to do that, but if you do like to do that or want to use that for fun, if you're like me and a big nerd, that would be something that you could do too.
Yeah, and there's definitely a lot of, especially in the monster and GM aspect, and not just from like a character facing stuff you can just take, right? I mean, Dread in the Jenga Tower, in terms of like espionage or anything like that, we're having the pool every time you fail. And then, when you fail, when the whole Jenga Tower comes falling down, that's the end of the espionage plot, and everything just kind of comes back to the players. Forge in the Dark does danger clocks, where they're just apparent clocks that people get to see, and so they can kind of look like, why does the GM keep ticking away at that clock? I don't like it. And then that's tension building right there. Yeah.
It's like the secret word for Pee Wee Herman, and every time something happens, the clock moves forward, but you don't know what it is.
Right.
Yeah, so definitely, like, especially in that area from the GM, like reading the GM aspect of a lot of these TTRPGs, and just, like, especially for the Danger Clock in the Jenga Tower, you don't really need a convert, you just kind of bring it over.
I stole the Danger Clock.
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, and that's a great one that you can add on to almost any system
It's
too.
a super
So yeah.
simple mechanic.
Yeah.
And like you said, especially when the players can see, they're just like, what the hell are you doing? But
Yeah, you just don't say anything, you're just like,
don't worry about it. I'm
Yeah.
sure it's nothing.
yeah.
Also has a danger, and it actually just straight up says I just stole it from.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Well, I was surprised because the Top Secret is a dice growth system where they have different dice and stuff. And one of my favorite aspects is on the GM screen, there's this little, like, this notch, and every time you fail, it increases the difficulty of all other challenges for the rest of the mission. So the more you fail, the longer the mission goes on, things just get more difficult. It's like Mission Impossible, just like with more stakes and less time. Which which I guess isn't really Mission Impossible at all.
Right.
But you kind of get where, like, you know, things are drastically getting worse and more dramatic as things go on. So that's one thing I love about, like, the Top Secret. And it's just a little notch that just increases the difficulty of everything, bit by bit.
Okay, so we're coming up on close to our time. So I want, I know you guys said that you were both willing to help out with people if they had other questions or anything like that. So how can people get a hold of you? Where can they find your stuff? Do you have anything for sale here? Pitch your guys' stuff to everybody. So
Yeah, my stuff is all at the IGDN booth, number 132. I have a fake game called Bulldogs. I have a game called 1,000 Arrows, which is powered by the Apocalypse, Warring States period Japan, and one called Katanas and Trenchcoats, which is a sort of a stripped down version of World of Darkness combined with Highlander and Fast and Furious.
Yep.
What was that room again?
132.
Yeah, it's like this big the indie game development network, which we're both, I think.
we're all
All of us are a part of. Yeah, it's really fun in a good group with a lot of resources. If you have any hankering to like learn more about the design world, I think it's pretty much the only group like
and you
it.
can reach me at brennanrtaylor on the social medias.
Yeah. And 1,000 Arrows, that's one of my favorites. I ran it 2 years ago.
Oh, did you? Yeah.
I think in GenCon or Origins.
Yeah, nice.
It was good. Yeah. I'm Mitch. I have my cards here. Currently finishing up with Chew, the role-playing game, which is Forged in the Dark. My main thing is Necrobiotic, which is a card-based system, so it's more resource management than unpredictability. Using a regular French deck of cards that then becomes a smaller deck based on the choices you make at character creation. We're at booth 161, which is just behind Gloomhaven, so you might not have money after going by. But feel free to grab some stuff there or just chat. So
Yeah, and I'm Crystal Mazur. You can find me on social medias at Body and Soul 152 on all platforms. If this did pique your interest, awesome. This is actually on sale at the IGDN booth for like $15. Otherwise, you can find it on DriveThruRPG. And I do a quarterly PIP system primer where I take new settings and play around with the mechanics. So if you're wondering like what I add and stuff like that, I'm doing RoboPip right now, and we've added like a whole bunch of like cybernetic rules and everything like that with the equipment. So I tinkered with that time. This time, I've done like a dinosaur setting where you play dinosaurs, where I made it where you can have 2 different archetypes. So I play around with the mechanics with this for almost every single PIP system primer. What was the other one I did? I did Aliens too, and we had a countdown timer for that, for the people in black to come and get your aliens. So if you want to see some of the examples of some of the stuff that I play around with, that would be where you find that.
And we'll say if you contact me directly, I'm happy to get in the weeds with you with whatever you're converting, talking about specifics. So.
Thank you guys very much for coming. I really appreciate you guys doing the workshop and being hands-on and awesome about it. So thank you so much. Yay!